EVE Online. This is my story. A new character was created, and his name, Lord Hedge. As many before him, and many after, Lord Hedge had big dreams and big ideas, and wanted to become a predominant figure in the New Eden universe. He was well aware that it wasn't going to be easy, and he had very difficult challenges ahead of him. Part 2. Before I could set my player-operated station up, I would have to seek out and find a good location for it. And I was aware at the time of a good website called Dotland Maps, and I spent some time there looking at different systems and how much traffic was going through and ore types and that sort of thing. In addition to Dotland Maps, there was also an important website called Eve Central, and this site was pretty much important to any industrial or trader to get up-to-date market information. With those two exceptional tools at your disposal, you could find very good information on prices for pretty much anything in the game, and you can also find some good trade routes, which I definitely needed after spending $750 million on my new freighter. And of course, during that time, 750 million ISK was a lot for me. But it turns out that that freighter was probably the best investment I had ever made in the game during my entire experience. So that freighter that I later called HSS Mars, HSS for Hegemony Service Ship, was to become the backbone of the Hegemony Research Corporation. So a little bit of time passed and I needed a little more ISK, so I did my standard mining operation and did a little bit of trading with the freighter using those two websites I was talking about. And once I had enough ISK, I took a trip to the best trading hub in the game, which is Jeddah. And that is where I was to purchase my small Amar tower and needed modules, standard stuff like the hangar array and a few guns and ship maintenance array, that sort of thing. Oh, and of course, a research laboratory. So I wanted the lab because I wanted to start getting into doing research and manufacturing, and that was kind of the direction that I wanted to head, because I was doing my mining thing and I wanted to find a way to make more ISK using the skills that I have acquired thus far. So I find my 0.5 system in high security space, and I set up my player operated station on a moon that I found acceptable. And you know, during pretty much my entire experience, I always liked to set up on moons that were more scenic, that had kind of a planet close by or had something interesting to look at. And I felt that I found something acceptable, so I went ahead and I set up. Now, during this period of time, I caught wind from SAR that Zark was quitting the game, and that Impeder's leadership was falling apart, and basically they were, you know, kind of fighting amongst themselves to pick a leader to run Impeder. So I took one last opportunity to contact Zark and inquire about the 300 million ISK that I invested into Impeder. And he basically told me that he gave it to Impeder itself, and that the leadership is going to determine, you know, how things are going to break down. So through SAR, I tried to get a hold of Impeder's leadership to inquire about the status of how things were going and, you know, maybe a possibility of getting my 300 million ISK back. But very shortly after whatever was going on with Impeder, they claimed that they had a corp thief that stole all the money that Impeder had. And, you know, I don't know if I believed it or not, but I knew I wasn't getting it back, so I wasn't going to push the issue any further because it was unnecessary. It didn't matter anyways. I was off and running and doing my own thing. Just as all this stuff was pretty much wrapping up, Hegemony Research was about to hit its golden age. And that's because one of my real-life friends decided that he was going to play the game with me. And so, Chairman Imes was born. Imes wanted to take a different approach to Eve. He didn't take a standard and conventional way, and that is his nature. He never does the status quo type things. He's very creative, and he kind of follows his own code of conduct. So when he started the game, he was basically asking me what roles in the corporation need to be filled. And my answer to that question, and people always ask that, and my answer to that question is, do whatever you think is going to be fun. What's going to be fun for you, do that. I mean, if I followed what other people were going to tell me to do in the game, I would have probably ended up doing PvP the whole time. And I like being the crafter. I like crafting. I like doing the industrial stuff. I mean, that to me is more interesting. You know, I just don't understand, like, some players' logic in this game. I mean, they look down on people that do industrial type stuff. I mean, they make fun of you and call you a Care Bear and that sort of thing, but, you know, so what? Like, this is my game too, just as much as it is yours, and I'm gonna take my path the way you took your path. And Chairman Imes decided in the beginning he wanted to be an explorer, and pretty much pushed hegemony research into another path of prosperity. It wasn't more than a week before he was scanning down sites and doing all kinds of things that I had no idea existed in the game. And I was extremely interested, and he had some very cool things that he was encountering, and he had my full attention. And then one day, it happened. He discovered a Class 1 wormhole. And again, these are things I had no idea existed in the game at all. So he decided to enter the Class 1 wormhole and do a little exploring. And it wasn't too long where he's like, hey dude, I found a mining field inside this thing, and I know you like to do mining. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. You know, what kind of stuff is in there? And he starts naming off the ores, and then we realize that the highest end ores are in there. It's got Arknor, Bistit, Crocite. It's got all the high end stuff. And I was like, well, very cool. Well, you mind if I, come over there and try to mine that? And he's like, yeah, sure, here, I'll give you the locations, whatever, we'll fleet up. I'm like, cool. So I went ahead and grabbed one of my retrievers that I had in a local system. So I go ahead and I head over to his location and enter the Class 1 wormhole. And he guides me over, and I get set up on the minefield and start mining some Bistit right off the beginning. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And then about 2 seconds later, Drake decloaks and destroys me in about 2 seconds. Little did we know that players can actually occupy and live inside these mysterious locations with epic ore in them. Or that I should be using some mysterious system that I had no idea existed on my ship called D-Scan. I believe my buddy at the time was flying a battlecruiser, a Harbinger. And he was near my location. I think he saw me get wiped, and he's like, oh crap. So he beelines it for the exit. So I think the wormhole was in decay, because when he got to the wormhole to try to leave the system, it was gone. And they may have closed it. I mean, anything is possible. So after they disarmed us and pretty much had us on the run, we started talking in local. And I pretty much, always the diplomatic type, was just, explaining what we were doing there, and, I had no idea that it was their system, and we didn't mean to, infringe on their territory, that sort of thing. The conversation was genuinely pretty friendly, and since they didn't see me as a threat, they're like, hey, you know what? We're going to start mining here in a second. Do you want to join us? I was like, really? Yeah, sure, I'll do that. So the player that was in the Drake that destroyed my mining barge, later to become known as Malia, offered to reimburse me for destroying my mining barge. I explained to her that that wasn't really necessary, no big deal, I can always get another one, but she went ahead and replaced the value of the ship anyways, which was really cool of that player. So we spent a couple hours in there with them mining, and we get done, and they go ahead and escort us out to the exit. And Chairman Imes is like, hey, maybe we should ask these guys to join in their alliance and hang out. And I was like, well, yeah, that sounds like a cool idea. So I go ahead and ask Malia and Erica and I believe Anturies, were the three that were with us and helping us, if we could, join their alliance and set up a player-operated station inside of the Wormhole. And they're like, well, you have to talk to our alliance leader, Cash. I said, okay, well, thank you guys for letting me hang out and mine with you guys. So pretty much immediately after we left the Wormhole, I started writing the email to Cash about the possibility of joining their alliance. It was about a day went by, and he contacted me and basically, was like, yeah, I know what happened with you and all that stuff, and yeah, you're welcome to join us. So I relayed the good news to Chairman Imes, and we immediately begun crunching the numbers to set up our player-operated station and the fuel required and all the stuff we're going to need. So we really didn't waste any time. We got set up quickly, we got all the stuff we needed, loaded up the freighter, headed over to the entrance of the Wormhole, and got all set up. Now, at this time, we were running 2 player-operated stations, and it was kind of expensive for us because the fuel required to keep both those up was substantial, but we were still unaware of how lucrative the Class 1 Wormhole was going to be. That essentially was a game changer for our corporation. So right away I began mining HighEnds, selling HighEnds and HighSec, and making more money than I'd ever made in the game previously. On top of that, we were joining in on fights against sleeper NPCs, and those were pretty valuable as well. Probably more valuable than mining, in a shorter period of time anyways. So after things were really going so well for us, we wanted to get more solidified into the Class 1 Wormhole. So we wanted to get a hold of a large shipyard, or XL shipyard, so that we can build a few battleships and feel a little more secure in the Wormhole. And keeping ourselves in a very good relationship and standing with our alliance and open communications, Anturies actually let us borrow his XL shipyard, which was very, very cool of him. Anturies, that guy was extremely crazy. He was so nuts. He would just always want to do these crazy adventures. He got us to do just the most ridiculous things in the game. But you know what? It's good he did, because I learned a lot after doing some of the crazy, crazy stuff that we did. For example, he got us to travel through Nullsec and set up inside of a Class 5 wormhole when we were relatively new to the game, and we had no ability whatsoever to farm any of the sites in the Class 5 wormhole. But we followed him anyways. And he was having us use our freighter to close the Class 5 wormhole exits to prevent players from coming inside. Just crazy stuff like that. And after a little bit, we took, some pretty substantial losses in the Class 5 wormhole just to NPC stuff and trying to do the sites. We decided to pull out. And it wasn't too much longer to where he was like, hey, some guy came in a capital ship and destroyed my station. I'm like, oh, jeez. Sorry, dude. That's crazy, though, Unfortunately for me, when I was leaving the Class 5, I had no way to travel through Nullsec in any secure manner. And, I was a fat, juicy target. Little did I know. I had my stuff loaded up, and I was trying to travel through Nullsec in my freighter, all the way to HighSec. Yeah, what do you think happened? Goodbye, freighter. Fortunately, with the Class 1 activities, I was able to easily replace my freighter without too much trouble. So out of necessity, and needing a second character for combat and as a scan alt for the Wormhole, I created Karen Sajetta. Karen, at the time, was going to be my placeholder for the Class 1 Wormhole so I could always find a way in and out, and was going to be my eyes and ears and my intelligence in the Class 1 Wormhole. I would always send that character first before I would do anything else to find out, what's what and if anyone's in there, or if I just needed to watch the wormhole, just leave a character sitting next to the wormhole as I watch people come in and out. That, of course, was a quite handy thing to have, as we would make many, many trips in and out of the wormhole to move a lot of ore around. For example, we needed a lot of ore to build the battleship. You could not just fly a battleship through the wormhole because the mass of the battleship was too large to enter the wormhole. So anything larger than a battlecruiser, you would have to build inside of the wormhole. And of course, we couldn't just have one. Not us. Oh no. We had to have about 10 or 15 battleships in there. And, we would have to pull in, 80 million tritanium to build those battleships. And, it was a lot of trips through there. Not to mention, you need fuel for your player-operated station, and, of course, you need weapons, and you need ammo, and you need to have a line of supply at all times. And you can see inside of a Class 1 wormhole, this can become problematic if you encounter a elite team of PvPers. They can make your life a living hell guarding off the wormhole. And sometimes you would get guys in there, and they would sit in there for a couple weeks, kind of just making life hard on you. But that's part of the dynamic and fun of EVE Online. So we're doing our thing, building our ships, and I remember this one day that we had just finished building our first battleship in the wormhole. It was an Abaddon, and I wanted to go test it out on sleepers. So I think me and Chairman loaded up and headed over to fight one of the sites, and pretty standard stuff, doing our thing, and all of a sudden, bam, we get jumped by like 5 ships. And of course, since I lacked in PvP and combat skills, and I had no idea how to properly fit my ships, I did not last more than 30 seconds probably in that fight, and we lost our first battleship that we had just christened and to use against sleepers, and that was a depressing day. But of course, these things happen in EVE Online, and that's just the way it goes. And you might get discouraged, and you might even feel like you want to quit the game. But out of these sort of encounters, you're always learning something new. You're always evolving and adapting in EVE Online, and it makes you stronger. And it helps you prepare for the next time you might encounter a similar situation. It wasn't long after these events where another one of my friends started playing EVE Online and joined in on our corporation. And so, Omega Geist was born. Omega, like so many before him, started playing the game, couldn't quite get into it, couldn't find his area of interest, and after a month of subscription, he stopped playing the game. Fortunately for Hegemony Research, that's not the last we see of Omega. He comes back to do some incredible things in EVE Online, and he works very hard to do the most efficient and profitable planetary interaction I've ever seen anyone ever do in EVE Online. But that story is for the last chapters of Hegemony Research. So, things are going quite well for me and Chairman Imes, and we form the second grand plan. With our activities in the Class 1 wormhole offering such a great profitable solution for us, we actually were looking into more areas to make even more profit. And we started crunching the numbers and decided to do reactions. So basically, we bought a bunch of player-operated stations to set up in the Class 1 wormhole, and one went up after another, setting up reaction after reaction. We got to the point where we had about 6 POSs up simultaneously, and you can imagine the amount of fuel required and the hauling required to maintain that level of fuel. Holy cow. So our workload in EVE Online went through the roof. You can imagine keeping all those POSs fueled, pulling out the reactions and cycling them, taking the finished products to the market, selling those, getting more fuel. Our freighter was at a full-time workload. It was always moving stuff. And something you got to note is you can't just take the freighter into the Class 1 wormhole. You have to dock up at a local station in HighSec, and hopefully the exit system has a station in it. Then you got to start loading up your hauler, and you have to go for hours and hours and hours bringing stuff in and out. So it was a big investment, but it was a big payoff. We made billions and billions of ISK. And what will we do with all that ISK? Build a capital ship in the Class 1 wormhole, of course. So it wasn't enough for us to be hauling all the fuel and keeping all the reactions and doing all the stuff, but no, we have to build ourselves a carrier in the Class 1 wormhole. And I think Chairman Imes was building up the skills while we were working on getting all the ore, and I think it takes around 50 million trit and about half that in pyrite and various other HighEnds, which are actually easier to haul than the core 2, which is titanium and pyrite. So as the corporation's wallet expands and we grow, we still have a long journey ahead of us. As we're starting to feel very successful, we look on as we feel we have a bright future in the New Eden universe.